Welcome back to another episode of Podward State. I'm your host, Sam Brungo. Joining me today for this special episode is associate producer of Podward State and Onward State sport editor, Will Pegler. Will, how's it going?
How's it going, Sam? Thanks again for having me back. It's good to be here for another episode. Podward State, baby.
Joining us on this episode, we have former Penn State All-American tight end, Adam Breneman, and he now coaches over at Arizona State. Will, what can you tell us about Adam?
It was awesome, dude. He took a ton of time. Pretty much, we talked about everything from getting recruited to Penn State during a pretty tumultuous time for the program. His podcast, his Penn State career, playing at UMass, ending up at Arizona State. We hit on pretty much everything, and he was super open about it. So, pretty cool episode. Another good one for you guys.
Without further ado, here's our conversation with Penn State tight end legend Adam Breneman. Joining us now, we have former Penn State tight end, former UMass tight end, current coach at University of Arizona State, also runs his own podcast called The Adam Breneman Show. We have joining us Adam Breneman. Adam, how's it going?
Doing good, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, of course. So to start out, we're just going to ask you a little bit about your recruitment process, because you had kind of a different one than most recruits deal with. So starting from the early days, what do you remember about the 2011-2012 seasons just from watching Penn State?
Yeah, that was kind of in the heart of my recruitment. My recruiting started when I was I think I was a sophomore in high school. So would have been 2011. So, had a bunch of offers and, was kind of getting some attention. It was funny. Penn State actually was one of the last schools to offer me during the whole process. I had tons. I had Notre Dame, Alabama, all these offers, and Penn State, which was at the time Joe Paterno's staff, had not yet offered me. So, which was frustrating because it was my hometown school, but I think that they kind of wanted to, I think they were thinking I would commit on the spot if they offered me. So they kind of wanted to wait a little bit. And, but no, that was interesting time in Penn State history. Then, Penn State eventually ended up offering me, the Paterno staff did. And then, a few weeks later was when the scandal broke and everyone kind of was gone. And it was funny, Mike McQuarrie was my lead recruiter at Penn State, so I talked to him a bunch, and it was just an interesting time, man, to be living in Central PA and all that. But those 2011 season was obviously all the adversity and I remember being at that game against Nebraska the week after they fired Joe Paterno, I believe. It was a home game against Nebraska in 2011. And then 2012, obviously I was committed during that season, went to a lot of the games and just, talk about a group of guys that'll be remembered at Penn State for a long, long time for the things they did. And that senior class in 2012 was pretty special.
Kind of going off of that, recruitment, you already talked about it a little bit, but, you were getting looks from places like Notre Dame, you said, I think even Alabama. Was it kind of like being a Pennsylvania kid? Was it kind of like you always had Penn State in the back of your mind, or did you come close to considering other places while you were kind of waiting on that Penn State offer?
It's funny because I was kind of a kid who the whole process until the end said, I'm not going to go to Penn State. I want to get away from home. I want to just experience something new. I'm not going to do what everyone does from PA and just go to Penn State. And I obviously ended up going to Penn State. So, that I didn't stay true to that. And it's funny, I see it now a lot with kids I recruit. A lot of, you'll have a Florida kid with a Florida offer, or an Iowa kid with an Iowa offer, Iowa State offer. You see a lot of those kids say originally from the start, oh, I don't want to stay home. I want to leave the state. And a lot of them end up staying home and going to their hometown school. So I was kind of that kind of kid. I had a lot of offers, obviously, and saw a lot of places. Really what drew me to Penn State at the end of the day was Bill O'Brien and his offense and what I wanted to do. I felt that it was the best fit for me. And then the fact that it was my hometown school and I was a fan of the program and loved the town and loved Penn State was just kind of in addition to the fact that I really felt it was the best fit for me football wise.
Can you talk a little bit about what it was like getting recruited during the scandal and during the sanctions, and then committing, doubling down on your commitment once the sanctions broke, and just what it was like to be one of those players in that first recruiting class.
Yeah, it was a crazy time. There's so many stories I could tell from the whole scandal and being recruited during it. We could talk about it for hours, but it was just a crazy time in Penn State history, and it was a crazy time in Pennsylvania. I mean, I obviously I was committed, when the sanctions broke. So kind of to back up a little bit, my recruitment started, after Joe Paterno was fired. Then they brought in Bill O'Brien. I committed to O'Brien. I think he got hired in like January of 2012. I committed in March of 2012. So I was, one of the early commits in that class. And, I was committed. So I committed after the scandal had broke, but before the sanctions came out. So no one really knew what was really going to happen to Penn State at that time. And, when the sanctions eventually did come out, that happened in July. So then a few months after I had committed to Penn State, the sanctions came out, and, scholarship reductions and no bowl games and the whole 9 yards and the fines and everything. And that was tough, because that was going to a program that a lot of people, obviously the media said that Penn State wouldn't win a game for 10 years and wouldn't be relevant. And Penn State was the new Temple, and just terrible things that were going to happen to the program. And really it was Coach O'Brien. And it was funny that I think it was the Saturday after the sanctions came out, Bill O'Brien, I remember O'Brien calling me the day the sanctions came out. O'Brien called me and said, before you decommit, before you do anything, I want you to come meet with me in State College. And so we went up on probably the next Saturday, along with the other commits. So in that group of guys was Christian Hackenberg, Garrett Sickles, Brendan Mann, even guys like Will Fuller was in that group because he was committed to Penn State, ended up decommitting, going to Notre Dame. There was probably a group of 8 or 9 guys that all went up to State College together to meet with O'Brien the Saturday after the sanctions broke. We all sat down, and O'Brien talked to us and told us the lay of the land, and this is what it is. And at the end of the day, here's the situation we're in, and here's the why you should come here. But now you got to make a choice of what you want to do. And it was at that time on that Saturday that we all decided, or most of us decided, that we were going to stay committed to Penn State. And it was an emotional day. I'll never forget that Saturday. We were going to State College. It was, a lot of people. I think that day, not just because of me, but because of Hackenberg and all the kids that stayed and what it meant for that program, for all of us to stay. I think that was a day that not a lot of people know even happened that Saturday, but it was a day that had a pretty big impact in the future of Penn State football. And, it was a big moment in our careers. And it was our parents were there. It was an emotional day. I remember, just the dads talking, and we were all kind of sat in a room together after O'Brien talked to us and made the decision. And at least most of us, some ended up decommitting, obviously, but most of us made the decision there at that moment on that Saturday to stay committed to Penn State through the sanctions.
Do you remember kind of like what, just going off that day, like what Bill said that really like stood out to you guys to kind of like convince you to, stick with the program and ride it out? Like what the big moment was, if you could recall that?
Yeah, I think, O'Brien was always real in everything he talked about. Like, he was not a recruiting, BS kind of guy. Like, he just told it to you straight. And I think a lot of it was kind of his point to us was that you can still accomplish everything that you want to accomplish in your career. You're going to play on national television. You're going to play in front of hundreds of thousands of fans. Just because we can't go to a bowl game, or just because we have less scholarship, doesn't mean that you can't achieve your goals personally. Now obviously some of us wanted to win championships, but we could still win a lot of games and still do the things we wanted to do. And I think also the idea of being part of something that was bigger than yourself and being part of rebuilding a program. And I kind of remember O'Brien saying that if you guys stay here, you'll be remembered forever. For a long time. And I remember him telling that to the 2012 guys too, the seniors, he had to Michael Mowdy and those guys. And then it was in that moment, we all sat in the team meeting room with O'Brien and our families. And then after O'Brien talked to us and answered questions, he left the room and let us all alone with just our the commits and our parents. And that was when, there were no coaches in there, and it was again, it was the players talking. It was kind of a little forum type setting, probably 30 people in there, maybe less, maybe 20. Few commits and their families. And I remember Garrett Sickles' dad talking and getting emotional, and Hack's dad and my dad, and, just kind of us, spilling what was on our hearts and how we felt about things. And it was then, probably after a 30-minute conversation with no coaches, just us, that we decided, we kind of said, let's do this thing together, and that we wanted to play together. And that was a big thing too. Like that class, we wanted to be together. And then that was when we walked upstairs to O'Brien's office and told him we were going to stay.
O'Brien's saying that you guys are going to be remembered forever. And I'm from State College, so growing up through that time, and he definitely was right. I mean, you guys will always be remembered as that team, and it stayed through the adversity and stuff. But what does it mean to you to be part of that team? And what do you think that the legacy for that recruiting class and the next couple and the ones before that should be?
It's a good question. I think, obviously, I get frustrated sometimes when I see, maybe frustrated is not the right word, but just you see people talk about Penn State, and maybe not now, because we're now a decade removed almost from the sanctions and everything. But when you saw Penn State win the Big Ten, and when you saw even when you saw them struggle in last year's games and different things, it almost seems like no one would really talk about where Penn State came from, and the fact that in 2012. Almost every single college football analyst or pundit or everyone said that Penn State wouldn't be relevant for a decade or two. And to come back and win the Big Ten in 2000 and I think it was 16 or one of those years is remarkable. And where that place come, I don't think there's many places that could have survived sanctions like that or that kind of adversity. But Penn State's obviously a different place and can survive a lot. But I've said this before on various platforms and talks about the Penn State deal. Out of all the different things I've done in my life and the different things I've experienced, one of the things I'm most proud of is what we did at Penn State, and I'm talking about off the field is just, I felt like we were a big part in giving that community a lot of hope, when obviously football is really important. And when a lot of these guys stayed, Hackenberg, myself, Sickles, a lot of the big time recruits stayed at Penn State through the sanctions. It gave a place hope that didn't have a lot of hope at the time. And I think, hopefully it made an impact and it encouraged other guys to join and kind of said to other people that, Penn State's going to survive and be okay. And obviously look where it is now. And obviously a lot of people get credit for that. Bill O'Brien, the fact that he held that place together through the sanctions and one of the hardest coaching jobs ever is amazing. I mean, James Franklin walked into a situation that is unlike any situation that anyone has ever walked into in the history of college football. I mean, no one's walked into a situation like he had to walk into after the sanctions and taking over that program. So a lot of people deserve credit for where that place is now. But it's pretty amazing to think about what people said Penn State would be and to think about where it is right now.
So for your true freshman season in 2013, outside of, Bill, who's obviously was an awesome leader, and you guys deciding to stay, do you remember any guys that kind of stood out to you, maybe some of the seniors or the other upperclassmen who really stepped up as leaders, like when you Hack, Sickles, when guys like that were coming in as freshmen?
I think a lot of the guys, there were guys from the 2012 team that served as almost leaders for us that we ended up never playing with, like guys like Mowdy and Zordich. We got to know those guys because we were commits at the time, and they were seniors, and they were cool guys just to get to know, through the whole process, because we were kind of it almost felt like they were passing the torch on to a new recruiting class, and so that was really cool. I think some of the seniors I played with, think about guys like John Urschel, guys like Ty Howell, who's obviously now the tight ends coach at Penn State, and those guys were great leaders, and even guys like Allen Robinson, he was young when I played with him, but, Adrian Amos, Jesse James to me was a big leader just because he wasn't that much older than me. I think he was 2 years older, but he taught me so much when I was my freshman year at Penn State, and we were on the field a lot together in those 12 personnel sets that Bill O'Brien used to use. So I learned a lot from him, man. And there are so many guys. Bill Belton, like you mentioned, was one. Zach Zwinak, I mean, there's so many guys in that. There's so many good dudes on that team. We always talked about like Penn State recruits a certain type of guy, like a Penn State guy. And it was cool to be part of that program and meet all those guys, some good guys that I still talk to, nowadays. And it's funny, like crossing paths with a lot of those guys who are coaching now and, just kind of building on those relationships. But yeah, there were too many leaders on that team to even count with the amount of adversity that we went through.
You talked about Bill O'Brien and his personality used. How much of an influence for you as a tight end was it to see what Bill O'Brien did with Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski and various other tight ends that really succeeded in his system? And how much of an influence was that for you to stay with O'Brien?
It was huge. I mean, that really is what made me go. What got me to go to Penn State was O'Brien coming from the Patriots, and he had just been in the Super Bowl and had that great season with Gronk and Hernandez. And I think that was kind of the ideal, 2 tight end system. And, there were a lot of things that made me think that I'd be a great fit in that offense. And obviously it worked out for the 1 year I got to play for O'Brien, but yeah, that was huge. I mean, he was kind of he kind of was that offense that the Patriots made the tight end position cool. I feel like a lot of people wanted to play tight end after that. And you got to see all the things a tight end could do in an offense. So it was a big part of my decision-making process for sure. And I learned a lot from playing in that system for a year.
So kind of something that's been talked about a lot with your years at Penn State. O'Brien eventually elects to leave. And I think, that change has been talked about a lot, but kind of a two-parter, like what was that change like for you personally? And then do you remember kind of where you saw that change take effect on the team as a whole?
Yeah, it was tough, obviously, when he left, just because, the decision to go to Penn State was so much about him, and about wanting to play for him and wanting to be in that system. Obviously, it's a business for everyone. It's a business for the players and the coaches, and everyone has goals. And was really happy for him at the time because I knew he wanted to be a head coach in the NFL, and he got a great opportunity. So, I don't fault him for doing what he did, but it was frustrating. It was upsetting, and I think you almost felt like you go back to square one because the whole staff from getting recruited by him, and you feel really comfortable, especially after my freshman season I had where played pretty well and feel like I really had some momentum going into my second year. And then to have a new coaching staff come in was difficult. It was difficult for the program too, for the team, because at that point, that place had been through a lot. Those players have been through a lot. And I think it was tough at first for the new guys to really accept the new coach, after kind of having a few different coaches, had Paterno, had the defensive coordinator who was Tad Bradley for the defense coordinator they thought maybe Larry Johnson was getting the job. They bring in O'Brien. O'Brien's there for 2 years and now he leaves. I think it was hard for Franklin to walk in there, and a lot of the guys had kind of a wall build up, for no one's fault, just kind of the natural reaction to what will be, having gone through a lot. But obviously that ended up, working itself out, and players love Franklin now, and he's done a really good job. But I think it was tough. It was a tough transition for the program and tough for our recruiting class. Because it was a lot of a big reason for why we went there was to play for him.
So your freshman year, obviously you played really well and it was really promising, but then you had to deal with some injuries, and coming back from that, what was that process like for you, and how did you overcome those injuries to continue on to be an All-American?
It was difficult because, like I talked about earlier, I had a good freshman season, and then had a knee injury in that first spring practice that Franklin was there. So first spring practice hurt my knee, which was tough, and I ended up getting surgery and missing my second season, redshirted that year. Since I didn't redshirt my first year, had that redshirt year available, so I had surgery and didn't play that second season, and then had knee problems again through that third year. So I think I played 2 games my third year, was dealing with my knee. And it was tough, but, at that point, that's kind of when I missed 2 seasons basically. And I had got my degree from Penn State, my undergrad, and kind of felt like, I think I thought my football career was all over at the time. I didn't really think I was going to be able to come back. And I was really in a bad place mentally. Missing 2 seasons is not easy on the mind. And kind of just said, I'm gonna walk away, and I thought I was gonna go work and just go, have a career and be done playing football, which was, thinking back on it, was crazy at the time. But I think I just kind of had to get away from it. So that's when I, retired from football at I was 20 years old, and I just got my undergrad degree pretty quickly because I was there all summer taking classes. So I was able to get my degree, and in December of 2015, I think it was. Being 20, I retired from football, left Penn State, and was kind of one of the next chapter of my life. And then, as you guys know, ended up a few months later transferring to UMass.
So kind of over your Penn State career, and even after, there was, including you, a lot of good tight ends that ended up at Penn State. One was Mike Gesicki, kind of as a guy who you took under your wing. Kind of curious about like that relationship, how that went for you. And also, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you thought about in your podcast, just like late night sheets runs and stuff like that. Just like what your relationship was with Gesicki, just kind of as a younger guy coming in while you were a little bit more of a veteran, a little bit more experienced.
Yeah, Mike's my guy. He's we've been really close since he first came on his recruiting visit, and we're so close now. So he's a great dude and a really close friend. And yeah, so I got to know him through his official visit when he came. He came for the Michigan game that we were talking about earlier, the 4 overtime game in 2013 was his official visit. So he came for that. I got to know him when he was here for that official visit. He obviously ended up coming to Penn State. Honestly, we started out, we were competing at first, I ended up having my knee injury, so couldn't play my second year. So he obviously got moved up on the depth chart, and so it was really then took that role of trying to help him out and just trying to be a team guy. And we got close throughout that whole process because he struggled some in his early career too, of dropping some passes and just being able to perform at a high level. He struggled some. So just kind of helping him through that. And, we ended up living together for a year. So that was always fun. And yeah, Mike's one of those dudes who like could eat whatever he wants, whenever, and like will always have a 6-pack and be ripped up. I do not have that luxury where like, if I eat bad for 2 days, I'll gain 8 pounds. So he would he would like go on these late night runs of sheets and get like 3 bags of candy and like 2 donuts, and like I would start doing that too, and before you know it, I was 260, like ready to be a tackle. So, some of Mike's habits rubbed off on me the bad way, but no, he's obviously a very gifted athlete, and he's a great person, man. He's been fun to watch his NFL career, and he's been my biggest supporter, throughout my whole anything I ask him to do ever. He does, and does anything he can to help me out. And it's been fun watching him have success in the NFL.
You did have a brief retirement stint, but then what took you out of that and made you choose UMass? What was that process like, and why was UMass the school that you ended up going to?
Yeah, so I took a few months off. I obviously had a knee injury; it was pretty bad, and I think I took a few months of like not working out, didn't do anything on my knee really, which I think helped a lot. Saw a bunch of doctors. It was kind of a complicated injury. I had some cartilage damage in my knee, and at that point, I had both knees operated on. One from my senior year of high school, I had an ACL injury, and then the one at Penn State was the other knee, which was unrelated to the ACL I had in high school, But this injury at Penn State was worse than that. It was a cartilage issue that's really hard to fix. And again, saw a lot of doctors and had to figure a lot of things out. But I think the time off helped a lot. And, it was honestly one day. It was funny when I retired from Penn State, I kind of had the mindset of like, I'm never playing football again. Like, this is kind of it. And, it's funny, you always say like your dad and your best friends know you're the best. Like my dad would always say to me, like, let's just get your release from Penn State. The release would allow me to transfer somewhere else, just in case you want to come back and play football again. And I was like, I'm never playing football again. Like, that's it. Like my knee's terrible. And it's funny, behind my back, my dad went and got my release from Penn State from the compliance people when I left Penn State. I had no idea. Probably come May of that 20 would have been 2016. I my knees started to feel better, and my high school quarterback had just transferred to UMass from Virginia Tech. the UMass head coach was a guy named Mark Whipple, whose son was Austin Whipple, who was a walk-on quarterback at Penn State with me. I became really good friends with Austin at Penn State, got to know Mark Whipple. And then he obviously was at UMass. Austin had since transferred to UMass to play for his dad. I just had a bunch of connections at UMass at the time, and knowing the head coach helps a lot. And the head coach loves using tight ends. And then they started reaching out to me, and, just the one thing happened, one thing after another. And I ended up, officially, I think I took an official visit to UMass one weekend, and then, ended up transferring and coming out of retirement and went to UMass for I guess what would have been my fourth season of college football in 2016. So it was just a lot of, I think it was good to get away from kind of Pennsylvania and just get off the grid a little bit. I was really comfortable with the UMass program and those coaches, and, Franklin was really good with me through that whole process. We had a lot of conversations, and it was open with him about it. And, we had talked about coming back to Penn State when I decided I wanted to come out of retirement. We talked about coming back there, but, just didn't really know if it was the best, the best thing for me to do, just to go back to Penn State after leaving. And I just didn't want to be a distraction to everybody, and ended up just deciding that it'd be best to kind of, move on somewhere else and try to have a kind of rejuvenate my career, and ended up working out at UMass for me.
Kind of jumping a few years down the road now. You eventually get into podcasting with the Adam Breneman show, and get like kind of a ton of ex-football players, current football players on, and do a lot of cool interviews. How did you get into podcasting, and kind of where the ideas start?
Yeah, so I I went to UMass, obviously had those two really good seasons, and then my knee that bothered me at Penn State ended up not holding up too well through those 2 years. So went to the Senior Bowl, the whole deal, and then had to retire, failed some physicals. Long story, but basically after that, I started working and decided that I wanted to be around football. I didn't think at the time I wanted to coach. So the next best thing is kind of media, get into TV show, broadcasting, radio, podcasting. So I got into that for, about a year and a half. And I had a podcast, like you said, did a Penn State radio show called Blue White Thursday Night on CBS Radio, did that for a season. I did some color commentary, TV broadcasting for different networks and ESPN3 and things like that. So did that for a little bit. The podcast was fun just because that was like truly my baby. I got to do whatever I wanted to do with that. And, when you go on the radio, they tell you what to say. When you go on TV, you got to talk about, we'll talk about what's in front of you. On podcasts, I could do whatever I wanted. So that was fun, for the time I got to do that. It was fun to connect with some guys that I hadn't talked to in a while, like having a guy like Michael Mowdy on, or, I had Silas Red on, like guys like that, talk about Penn State a lot. Obviously, had some other guys on from different teams, different programs. And, so that was fun for me. I think I did like 18 episodes or something like that. But then obviously, I had kind of an itch to like get closer to football even more. And after a year or two of doing that, the media stuff, decided I wanted to get into coaching, and, that's kind of how I ended up at ASU and got here, as a graduate assistant last year, and now as a tight ends coach. So, now, obviously, when you get into coaching, all the media stuff has to stop. So I no longer do the podcast or do the radio show or anything like that, just because obviously my time is is taken up with coaching the players we have here and recruiting. But I always love joining podcasts and talking about the past life when I can.
Yeah, I like I said earlier, both of us are lifelong Penn State fans, so we enjoyed listening to the podcast quite a bit. I drove cross country this summer, and I listened to it was pretty much the soundtrack of my trip. So thank you for that. I really enjoyed the Silas Red conversation that you have, because I remember my little 12-year-old brain at that time when he transferred, not really understanding it. And, we talked to Jordan Hill, his roommate, about it a little bit, but just getting to understand the thought process behind him transferring and leaving was less about jumping ship and more about a new start. So what was your favorite guest that you had on the podcast? Because that certainly was mine.
That's a good question. Now, the Silas Red one was fun. And again, I didn't know Silas very well before I had him on the podcast. Just kind of had to hit him up on Instagram or Twitter or something, ask him to get on. But that was a cool one. A lot of people, talk about that one with me. I think because the conversation was really authentic, and it seemed like he opened up a lot, and it was almost felt like he was looking forward to getting something off his chest a little bit, and I think that was cool, and it was cool to hear his perspective. But I mean, there are a lot of fun ones. I mean, the fun ones for me are always like the guys I know really well, like Mike Gesicki and Trace and Hack and all those guys. Obviously, the Hackenberg one was a lot of people like that one, and we made the news a little bit in that one for talking about Bill O'Brien's departure from Penn State. So I don't know how much Coach O'Brien liked that one, but it was that was a fun one, and got to be just to be real. And I think it's probably cool for fans and Penn State fans and football fans to hear former teammates talk about some of those experiences, and I felt the Tommy Stevens one was cool just because it was the first time Tommy had really talked about leaving Penn State and what happened there and why he left. And it was cool. And then we also did some, I didn't want it to turn into like the Penn State wash up podcast. So I had to bring in other guys too. Like I talked to Malik Zaire for a little bit, the Notre Dame quarterback. And there are a bunch of guys, some of my UMass teammates. It was a fun thing to do. And again, wish I could have just kept doing it, but I got called into coaching, man. So the podcast had to go on hold. But I can't pick a favorite, because if I pick a favorite, I'm gonna get a lot of crap from the other guys that I don't pick.
How often do you keep in touch with those guys, specifically Bill O'Brien?
O'Brien, I mean, not super regular, but we stay in touch, and he was super, he reached out a lot during my UMass career. Even his wife, Colleen, would reach out a lot, and he's been good. He congratulated me when I got the ASU tight ends coach job, and obviously he's at Alabama now. So we stay in contact a decent amount, and that's always something. A lot of those guys that coached me, even John Strollo was my tight ends coach at Penn State when Bill O'Brien was there. So we stay in touch a lot, and obviously all those guys from Coach Franklin's staff I got to know really well. It was funny because I didn't really play for them very much. I was there for 2 years, hardly played at all, but almost I think because of that I got to know the coaches really well, because I was off the field so much and hanging out with all them. So all those guys on that staff, Franklin and Brent Pry and all those guys, even the guys that have left now, like Josh Gaddis at Michigan and Charles Huff at I forget where he is, at Marshall, right? Charles Huff at Marshall, and Tyler Bowen, who's now with the Jaguars. Like, all those guys have been awesome to me, and I stay in touch with all of them. Tyler Bowen was a GA when I was at Penn State. Joe Brady was the tight ends GA when I was at Penn State. So to think about where he is now as the OC of the Panthers at 30 years old is crazy.
But kind of going from there, you said you ended up at Arizona State, spent a year as a graduate assistant, but now you're the tight ends coach. I feel like that's a pretty fast coaching arc. So, I mean, I guess kind of curious, if you could go through it, how that process went, getting not recruited, but getting hired at Arizona State, and then what your time has been like there so far.
Yeah. So I decided I wanted to coach. I think it was probably January 2020. So it was when I was like, I want to get into coaching, and, I reached out to some contacts I had. I actually drove to State College on one Saturday. It's funny. I drove to State College on a Saturday morning, or maybe it was a Friday night, with Mike Gesicki, because Mike wanted to go to the basketball game that Saturday. So we went to the basketball game, and then I think it was Sunday morning, I met with Franklin in his office about coaching. And at this time I was doing the podcast and the whole media stuff, and I was doing the radio show and the whole deal. And I met with Franklin on a Sunday morning and basically told him I wanted to coach and asked for his advice, and really in the back of my mind trying to ask if there was an opening at this Penn State for me, trying to figure out that whole deal. And, he didn't really have anything at the time, but kind of said, you need to go try to be a GA somewhere and find an opportunity no matter where it is, and gave me a lot of advice. And he's been great through this whole process, but, reach out to a lot of people I knew. And luckily my strength coach at UMass had recently became the strength coach here at Arizona State back in 2019, I think it was. So Herm hired him in 19 or 18, or when Herm first got hired, he brought in, Joe Conley, who was my strength coach at UMass. So when ASU had an opening on the offensive staff for a GA spot, Obviously there's only two of them on offense. One opened up, and Coach Conley, the strength coach, recommended me, and I got an interview, and it was a crazy fast process. The offensive coordinator, Zach Hill, interviewed me here, and I think he interviewed me on a Friday, and then I was in Tempe, Arizona by Wednesday. So it was a very quick process, and my life changed in the blink of an eye. But I've been here ever since, and it's an awesome staff to be on. I mean, Herm he's awesome, and it's a great staff to be on as a young coach. He empowers young coaches and young people, and obviously was a GA for a year. Had an opening at the tight ends coach this offseason, which is that's just fate. The fact that happens the year after 1 year of being here. Some coaches wait a long time to get an opportunity like I got, which I'm very thankful for, and then got interviewed for the tight ends job, and then luckily, Herm decided to hire me, this offseason. So it's been a total blessing, man. I mean, I can't even. It is crazy, in this business, you're just going all the time, recruiting and working and coaching, that you really get time to sit back and think about it. We had a week off last week after spring practice, and my family came out to visit and everything, and it was just kind of crazy to sit there and think about the past year and 3-4 months and how my life has changed and kind of where I'm at now, and to be 26 and the tight ends coach at Arizona State. I think I'm the youngest in the country is just it's a crazy thing to think about. And obviously a lot of responsibility too, because there's a lot of pressure and a lot of it's a performance-based business. You got to produce or you won't be around very long. So I'm very aware of that as well. But it's been a blessing, and this place, Arizona State, it's been awesome. And there's been a lot of people along the way that have helped me get here. From all those coaches I mentioned, helped me. Franklin helped me get here. He helped me get this job. So there's been a lot of people that have been here along the way.
So Arizona State has this kind of like a star-studded coaching staff with Herm Edwards and Antonio Pierce. So what's it like to work work with some of those guys and just picking their football brains? Obviously, they've been very successful over the course of their career. So
it is crazy just to kind of sit around every day and to kind of be in meetings and just realize all the knowledge that's around you. I just try to be a sponge and write down as much as I can and learn as much as I can and take everything in. I mean, you go down the list of Herm, obviously, who, he's awesome. And the advice and the guidance he gives me and the other young coaches is really awesome outside of the football stuff, but the life stuff and how to teach and how to motivate people and how to be a leader. The stuff he teaches from that standpoint is awesome. And then, like you said, AP, Antonio Pierce, I mean, I've learned so much from that dude about relationships and recruiting and just, he's been awesome to be around, and he's as smart as they come. And then you even got Marvin Lewis here, was our defensive coordinator last year and is now our special assistant to the head coach. And he was the Bengals head coach for 16 years. And I mean, he's here, just having him here every day, and just tons of NFL guys. Donnie Henderson was the NFL defensive coordinator who's here. So many coaches up and down our staff that come from the NFL and play in the NFL. Bobby Wade, the longtime NFL wide receiver, is our graduate assistant. I mean, what kind of staff has that on it? And it's a great place to be. A lot of knowledge, a lot of guys who come from the NFL. We talk about the pro model a lot, how we kind of do things the NFL way. Herm kind of runs the operation like an NFL system, which is really neat.
So I gotta ask one quick Herm follow up. Does anybody ever chirp him about the "you play to win the game" clip? Or no?
Yeah, it gets brought up a decent amount. He does not. He won't do it again. He says that once you do it once, you don't got to do it again. So he gets a lot of comments on it, obviously. But I mean, he's got so many of those one-line quotes. I try to write them all down when he says them.
So Arizona State has a pretty good young core. So what's it like working with some of these young players? Obviously, your position's very talented, but Jalen Daniels, who as a freshman really got national attention. So what's the future hold for Arizona State, and what's it like playing with these young players that have a lot left in their college career?
It's an exciting time for us for sure. Obviously, we got a lot of talent. We've recruited pretty well the last few years here, and this is kind of a lot of guys are coming back for a final season. Jane Daniels has a chance to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and we got a chance to be pretty good this year. So we got to put it all together, but a lot of it comes from recruiting. We've recruited at a really high level and recruited not just talented guys, but the right people. We've gone national with recruiting, and I think Herm's Herm's brand has kind of allowed us to go into Philadelphia and go into Nebraska and Florida and these other states and recruit. And not just have to live on the West Coast and not just live in California and Arizona, but to go out and get guys from all parts of the country. I think the Arizona State brand has become kind of like a sexy brand lately, and it's been good. You see a lot of top recruits in the country posting those top fives, and Arizona State's in it, along with the powerhouses of college football, and that's where we want to be. I think we're now, consistently and preseason going to be ranked as a top 20 program, and a lot of people are kind of as a dark horse to kind of have a pretty good season. So, now we got to go perform and we got to go do it. And really, as you guys know, it's a talent game. It's a recruiting game. It's about who has the best players, and the more games we win, the better players we can get, the better we become. So, good players make coaches look a lot better on Saturdays.
So you brought it up a little bit. You're one of, or if not the youngest position coaches in the country in college football right now. 24/7 Sports even included you one of the top 30 coaches under 30 on that list. So kind of what's it like to be recognized for that? And also kind of as a younger coach, are there any guys that you've met along the way that you still kind of look to for advice or reach out to throughout the season?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously an honor, and it was my goal when I got this GA job at Arizona State. My goal was to be a tight ends coach as fast as I could, because it's what I wanted to do. It's obviously it feels good. I mean, it's good to be recognized for your hard work, and I have worked hard and put a lot of time into this past season. And I know I've only been in college football coaching for a year and a few months, and a lot of people have put in a lot more time than I have and worked really hard. But a lot of it's luck, a lot of it's just knowing the right people, and a lot of it's just guys believing in me. The fact that Herm gave me this opportunity at what he did is it's rare. And again, it's an honor, but a lot of people have helped me along the way, like I said, and a lot of coaches I've coached with before. But then here at Arizona State, we have young coaches. We have, Chris Hawkins is our defensive backs coach, who last year was our DBs coach when I was a GA, and Chris Hawkins is like 2 weeks older than me. So, he was here, it was he used to brag all the time about being the youngest coach in the country. And then I got hired and I took over the title by 2 weeks. So that's always a fun thing to joke about. But really, I mean, he's a big one. Like when I got here as a GA, and he was a 25-year-old defensive backs coach at Arizona State. He really, took me under his wing and was like, hey, here's what you got to do to become a coach next year. Because he did it the year before at USC. He was a GA at USC, got the DB's coach job at ASU. He helped me a lot, and we got tons of guys. Prentice Gill is our wide receivers coach, who's 30 years old. I mentioned before, but Tyler Bowen was a big one for me. Tebow helped me a lot just when I got the tight ends job here, helped me during the interview process, helped me during a lot of different steps along the way of being a tight ends coach and drills and how to plan practice and things like that. So, it's been good. And obviously a lot of recognition you get in this business comes from recruiting. That's the reality. Is that's kind of the bread and butter of college football is bringing in good players. And I've worked really hard at recruiting and developing relationships. And it's a grind. You put a lot of time into it and don't always get the result you wanted. You never know which way it's going to fall, but just try to, spend as much time as I can just developing relationships with players and trying to find the best players in the country and getting them to come to Arizona State.
Yeah, awesome. We got one more question for you because we know you got to go get some food. And Adam, thank you so much for your time again. But you did mention recruiting, and we are a Penn State show, so I don't know how much you're allowed to say about this, but what would your recruiting pitch be to come to a place like Penn State, and what really got you to commit here?
Yeah, you got to be careful because I recruit against Penn State now a little bit. So that is always a fun battle though, when it's recruiting against guys that I know the coaches that are recruiting the guys I'm recruiting. So, but I mean, obviously, man, like as you guys know, like I've been a Penn State fan my whole life, and I'll always be a Penn Stater. That'll always be something that I take with me forever. I'm really proud of that school and the things we did there, and it's been a big part of my life for a long time. My family's Penn State fans, and I think there's a lot of things that place has to sell, and obviously Coach Franklin does a good job. He sells it enough. I don't think he needs me to sell it too, but it is a unique place. I mean, there aren't there aren't many programs or towns with the passion that place has for college football and for Penn State. That's a unique thing. And that coaching staff does a great job, and they recruit at a really high level, and they've obviously played at a high level. I'm excited to see them play this fall. That's something I always try to do, is catch the Penn State games when I can, partially because I know a lot of those coaches and those guys on the team. But that is how you're getting old, when I no longer know the players on the team. I think Fryermuth was like the last guy that I know that's on the Penn. I don't even know the rest of the guys on the team anymore. So that's how I know I'm getting old. But no, it's a great place, man. But for now, I mean, for hopefully a long time, I'm selling Arizona State instead of Penn State. So hopefully we win a couple of these recruiting battles and we start competing with them on the field.
Adam, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate all of your stories, and best of luck to you in the future.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
There you have it, folks. That was our chat with former Penn State football player Adam Breneman, current Arizona State tight ends coach. Really cool conversation. We hope you guys enjoyed that. Thanks again, Will, for joining us.
Yeah, Sam. Thanks again for having me. Thanks to Adam for coming on and taking the time. Another really cool episode. We've gotten to talk to some really cool people, so I'm having fun. It's been awesome.
Yeah, we got some cool episodes coming on, so stay tuned, guys. Thank you for listening to Podward State. My name is Samuel Brungo. I am your host. Signing off. Stay safe, y'all. Podward State is an Onward State produced podcast. Onward State is an independent, student-run Penn State news site that works to generate honest conversation in the hopes of enriching the Penn State community. The show was founded by Matthew Ogden, Matthew Palizzi, and Mitchell Stewart in 2019. The show is hosted by Samuel Brungo, Matthew Palizzi, and Grace Cunningham. Executive producer, Samuel Brungo. Associate producers, Jordan Mansberger and Will Pegler. Editor, Samuel Brungo. Podward State releases episodes weekly and features discussions about all things Penn State, including sports, news, student life, and entertainment, which will be available on Spotify and YouTube. It's these clouds.